wait for it to connect. All right, we are the Node Loaders team. It is September 28th, 2021. It's our regular meeting, and there we go. We're live on YouTube. So, Brian, did you want to say anything else? We were just starting to talk about instrumentation before I decided to start recording. So.
Yeah, but maybe we should start with what's actually on the agenda.
We could do that too.
Because we could talk about instrumentation for days. So yeah, let's start with the agenda, I think.
All right, Jacob, do you want to share what you got?
Sure. So since a few days ago when we had our last meeting, I've made the pull request. Well, actually, Jeffrey, you made the initial pull request to pull the stuff apart. And then I made the subsequent one that created the two proposals of the quote unquote recursive version and the iterative quote unquote version of how loaders might be implemented, and updated the examples per, I think, all the things that we've talked about. I started to add the example for Gil's mocking, so much as we've sort of gleaned from that. I only got about like 3/4 of the way through that, so I didn't include it in my most recent push to the pull request. But those things are up. And basically, as I was kind of going through those, sorry to repeat myself for those on Slack, it seems like they're largely similar. There are a couple key differences, mostly that I at least personally find the recursive version extremely confusing. So when I was making the updates to the various things, I had to make them multiple times because I kept updating them incorrectly. And that in basically all cases, we, I think, have universally agreed that a short circuit should be explicit rather than an implicit, because it's, as it was previously, it was too easy to accidentally do it. And then you end up with like very weird results that are difficult to figure out what happened. So I have not added that to the recursive proposal. I'm not sure how we want to handle that, if we want to add.
I did have a thought about that, which was, I think it could be as simple as like every hook needs to return an object, because it either needs to like short circuit and return what's intending to be the final object, or it needs to call next and then return the return value of that. So you're always returning something. So I think what we could do is there should be some way, I would think, to track whether a function has been run. So like, as say you've got 3 resolve hooks, like 3 user defined resolve hooks, and then the node resolve hook. Maybe we don't care about the node one, but the other 3, like as we like take them from the loaders that the users have defined, we could like wrap them in some kind of simple wrapper that just tracks if it's been run or something. Like it just passes its same input into the loader, the exported resolve hook that came from the user loader, and then we inject something that says like, okay, loader number 1 resolve hook has been executed, And so what we could do is like, for a particular specifier, if a loader, if we don't get all 3 of those flags set, so that, as in like all 3 user-defined resolve hooks haven't been run, then you look into the return value of the object, which currently the return value of resolve is just an object with 1 property URL. So if not all of them have been run, then you also look in the return object to see, is there also a short circuit true property on that return object? If not, error. So that way it's like, if your loader hook short circuits, you have to set that value on the object, or else you'll get an error because Node will have detected that not all of the registered hooks have run, and you haven't explicitly said that you're short circuiting.
Cool. I like that idea. I was toying with basically exactly the same thing of like setting a short circuit property on the return to say true, and that being the flag, rather than having to inject another argument into the thing and blah, 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 blah. So yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I think part of that design is trying to, stay, there's already so much input for each function that like, the more things we cram into the input for the function, it's almost makes it more difficult, because then it's like, when you get to chaining, then it's like all other hooks need to kind of handle all potential input. And so it was trying to kind of keep it simple in that regard. Like we were initially talking about, like right now it's like the last property is next, which replaces the current shipped versions like default resolve, because it's always like we have the recursive chaining model is in Node right now, but it's always just like user to Node and no other user ones. And so there was discussion of like, well, instead of just replacing that last parameter, which is default resolve or default load, with next, maybe we should have both, like next and then a fourth parameter is default. And that way, if you need to call the default one, you always can. You can like kind of call it out of order or something.
I very strongly don't think we should have the default one available.
I think that's
extremely
this was
prejudiced against adding it.
Yeah, this was the discussion like a year ago. So, and I think that was the result. Was like, for whatever reason, we decided that was a bad idea. But I think there are probably reasons specific to default why that was a bad idea. But also, I think there was desire not to make the hook so complicated, because then you have to handle all these extra cases. So
I definitely am on board with limiting the number of arguments. I feel like after you get beyond like 3, like you should reconsider.
Well, the number of arguments, but also just like the amount of input in general. Like we could throw lots and lots of stuff on context, but it just makes loaders more difficult to write the more options we give people in a way.
It is. I do not think number of options is necessarily bad for API data points. The problem is you have 2 different resolvers or hooks that you chain into. And almost 100% of time when I was looking at it, if you compose loaders, you never want to call the default one, because you're going to break your composition model.
Yeah, maybe that's what it was. Maybe it's not just options specifically. I think you're right.
Things like a loader that always wants to intercept the FS module is not possible if somebody can always call the default loader.
Yeah.
Well, unless the default loader also uses those mocked or whatever FS things.
It can't, because it's the default. It is the intrinsic one using the built-ins.
Right. The assumption here is that the FS module modification is done through the use of loaders and not through something else.
Yes.
Right.
As in,
but I thought we were saying
I
it would
think,
affect all internal things.
I think that's the difference basically between like the monkey patching common JS that people are used to and the new model with loaders, is that like you can mock FS through a loader, but it only affects user code, not node internals.
No, I thought Bradley ran us through last week how it could only affect internals.
Nope. We are talking about an entirely different set of hooks, not related to.
I think that we were discussing potentially making other hooks for specifically overriding FS, like a whole separate set of loader hooks, if you will, or override hooks, whatever you call it. Well, I was talking about like if you're using resolve to, like resolve can mock like resolve can see, like if you create a resolve hook, it looks for a specifier of FS and then return, and then decides like, oh, we're not going to return format built in. We're going to return format module. And then here's the function to, or object or whatever to return when that's resolved. So now you've just suddenly replaced calls for FS with your own logic. But that affects like user code, like the user's application and any dependencies in Node modules. It doesn't affect like Node internals.
Oh, okay, yes. Sorry, I thought you were saying, I thought you were talking about those override things that we were talking about from last time.
Now, I think we were talking about maybe creating a whole separate type of hook that's like specific to FS, of like, if you want to override fs.read file or something like that, here's a different hook that does that. And maybe it even is used for Node internals. But that was like a whole separate issue unrelated to modules. That's like FS hooks or whatever, you know, file system hooks or whatever, like a whole separate feature that we could build into Node.
Right, but I'm thinking if we do that, then if default loader or whatever, default resolve and default load would also consume those because it's internal.
That only
because-
works for FS. So let's use a different module that's not affected by hooks. Let's say we're trying to overload DNS. Are we going to add loader hooks to DNS to do the same? Like, you don't want this. You don't want this composition model where the default goes.
This is
through
what I
the
was saying
loader.
last time, that this is going to like open Pandora's box. So like we have to be very.
Well,
No.
you could make hooks for
So the
anything.
Pandora's
Like,
box is default. You included default and you want default to be re-entrant. Re-entrancy is bad. You don't want default to suddenly be re-entrant on every possible loader hook combination. So the default node loader is very limited in what it can actually rely on for internal behavior. And so when we have a composition model where you have some user loader hook that is mocking or replacing or instrumenting a built-in or a userland library, you want that mock or userland library to entirely subsume all possible references to the actual built-in. And so you absolutely can never have the default because it will not use that userland loaders replacement. And the default can do things without the userland's replacement. In fact, it needs to, it must. But the userland is just augmenting the built-in. It's not trying to say the built-ins should be internally re-entrant to the userland loader.
Yes. Hold on, I'm gonna catch up.
so Bradley, just getting back to the DNS question for a second, it's an apt choice of example because
I think he froze.
Did he freeze or is he thinking?
Oh, it's frozen.
Oh, okay. Oh, he did mention before we joined that his computer has been restarting all day. So hopefully, well, we'll know in a second because won't this suddenly crash?
We'll see.
Welcome back.
Oh,
All right. I don't know how long this is going to stay, but
it's like
what I was going to
speaking from
say
beyond the
is,
grave.
yeah, at work, I met someone recently who found out that I work on Node, and he was like, "Oh, I've been monkey patching the DNS module for 10 years. Why doesn't it support caching? Like every project I've ever done, I've monkey patched DNS to add caching. When is that going to be added to Node Core?" And I was like, I told
A few
him
years ago, they're using the wrong function.
Well, maybe you can give me a better answer to give him. But I told him a long story about how hard it is to add things to core and small core and blah blah blah. But like that's my point is though, like there are things like that like, you know, someone wants DNS to behave differently. Like maybe it's Pandora's box and we add hooks all over the place, but that's probably better than monkey patching or allowing monkey patching of like all core modules. So it's just something to consider. Or we do allow monkey patching the same way on the browser. You can like monkey patch fetch and XML HTTP requests and do some wild things once you hijack like network requests from the browser. So I don't know, maybe that's an option, but we could also just debate this later. Like this is like, I almost feel like we should build loader hooks first and then talk about if we want to have hooks for other things in Node,
Yeah,
Well,
so I mean, enabling monkey patching is something that's, kind of near and dear to the product I work on. That being said, like loaders is kind of tangential. Diagnosis channel, it provides pretty much all the stuff similar to monkey patching that we'll pretty much ever need in terms of observability. And things like diagnostic channel, or perhaps a future replacement for diagnostic channel, is probably going to be the answer to these sorts of questions. And so to me, it's a little bit tangential to loaders, at least for now.
For me, the only complaint is if you include default and not the composition model, if you have two separate resolvers, like really bad things happen in terms of API design. It's just escape hatches everywhere, so nothing can be trusted.
Well, it means all your assumptions are basically wrong in every single loader. So yeah.
Yes.
Like you can't assume that one loader happened, like all of its functionality happened correctly. Like, oh yeah, can of worms.
So oh, you've been promoted, Brian.
Have I? What have I been promoted to?
You've been promoted to the host.
Oh, interesting. I got no notification that I'm the host now, which is interesting. But we're still recording, right? We're still live on YouTube.
I think so. It's saying maybe it's better that you don't know. Then you can't go mad with power.
All right then.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
two different models as the only agenda item. So is there anything in particular we want to talk about this week? It's a little bit shorter than our normal cadence between them. Due to scheduling change.
I think nothing in particular, although I do like the idea from Jeffrey about the adjusting the return to have that like secret, well, not secret, but the like special short circuit rather than a method. In terms of not exposing the default loader, I'm a little bit confused because a few meetings back, we talked about potentially exposing that in the iterative approach because I forget who, several people were saying that they needed access to it. And now Bradley,
So
no,
in the iterative approach, you have to have it.
Oh, okay.
In the iterative approach, you can't make as many assumptions about your caller as you can in the recursive approach. You just know somebody called you. You don't have control over who's going to be called next in particular. So you have to have the default because you need reentrancies so that the first loader can do partial operations.
Oh, okay, cool. So your concerns were
it's really
only
problematic because you need both the defaults so that the first one can do partial resolves, and you need the first loader, which are two different ends, because you need reentrancy. So in order to support a resolve further down the line, so say you have a loader, one supports zip archives, one has some sort of weird file renaming scheme. They have to talk to each other in a reentrant way. And to do so with recursive, you do it by return value and calling the other loader repeatedly until you get to some sort of agreement. With iterative, you don't have that level of control. And so you have to basically have the first one just called the default loader, get a result, which is essentially the same as the most nested recursion layer. So it's the first action. And then it passes it on to the next iteration step. That iteration step needs to coordinate with the previous iteration step. So it has to send it back to the front of the iteration loop and do it again until there's some sort of matchup.
Why does it need to send it back?
So this is all the examples we have where you mutate something about the result.
Right.
And so whenever you mutate something about the results, you have to send it back to the start of the iteration loop. In case the other resolver, for example, you're in a zip archive suddenly because the first resolver has decided after default resolve, we've resolved inside of a zip archive. Well, the next resolver doesn't know how to deal with zip archives at all. And so it can't use the defaults, and it needs to do some extra work against the original result of the first step inside the zip archive. So for example, the zip archive could use a specifier. It resolves to a directory within a zip archive. The second one does file searching within the zip archive. Well, the second one can't do file searching in the zip archive because it doesn't know how to deal with zip archives. It only knows how to deal with file searching against URLs. So it has to call back to the original one to do a new resolve operation in order to check for like index.js instead of a trailing slash and then index.json.
But wouldn't it have been the responsibility of the zip loader to return something that everybody can understand?
No.
So it says like, hey, I receive a zip archive, and it's like, cool. I am your Babel stone or whatever, Rosetta Stone. Here you go. This is what this means.
Correct. And it resolved it to a directory in a zip archive.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So you just sequence it so that zip archive, then directory, whatever
Then
have you.
zip archive again, then directory again, then zip archive. You have to
like there's
keep doing it
an
forever.
embedded, like there's an embedded zip archive within a zip archive.
No, just to do a file search within a zip archive, you can't use FS, you can't use the default loader. You have to call back into the zip archives loader.
Okay. I admittedly do not know
So it
terribly
doesn't matter.
much about how
Let's
zip
just say
archives work.
there is a directory on disk that the FS module can't access and your previous step can.
But then your previous step should have sorted that, no?
No,
I feel like
it just knows how to resolve.
Know.
It just knows how to resolve into that directory. It doesn't do magic file searching. That's a different loader. Loaders can't do everything that every loader ever wants. So like you could have this searching loader and it would work against HTTP, for example. It's built to work against URLs. It's not built to work against the FS. And so it's not the responsibility of an HTTP loader to start searching for index.js files. That's the responsibility of the searching loader.
Okay.
So one's providing HTTP, the other's providing, one URL can map to a searched path.
So you're foreseeing a situation where you need to have repeated calls. So like I am sitting above, let's say I'm, I don't know, this FS loader, and I see, oh, there's a zip thing here. I don't understand this. Send this off to my interpreter, my zip interpreter. Zip interpreter comes back and it's like, cool, go back. I need this other thing. It comes back and then it says, wait, one more thing.
Yep.
Oof. Okay.
I mean, this is a basic one for how what people want with magic file searching is. It always calls out to another loader to do the resolves. And
this is not something that can be facilitated via the message channel. Or message channel is just not a good way to do this.
I mean, you could send whatever you want via message channel, but then you're just doing recursion in the iterative design. It would be much simpler to just send it back to the start.
How?
You just like you can call the default loader, you call instead of the default loader,
Mhm.
you call the first user loader.
Okay. So
So those are two
you've got
different-
your loop going. You've got your loop going. Let's say, I don't know, your third argument is restart. You feed restart whatever you have, and then kind of like you go away, and then restart jumps back to the start of the loop. It runs through all the stuff. It eventually gets back to you, and you're like, cool, here's some new stuff, restart.
Yep.
Go again.
Yep.
Okay. Definitely more complex than just a plain iteration. But
I
definitely
don't think
good
we're
to
going to
know.
encounter plain iteration in most complicated situations.
I was thinking when, for instance, you've got like an HTTPS loader, a CoffeeScript loader, and a Babel loader. HTTPS fetches the things from remote, that passes it on to, it returns a CoffeeScript file. That CoffeeScript file goes to the CoffeeScript loader. CoffeeScript loader converts it to JavaScript. Turns out that it has like some bleeding edge JavaScript. The Babel loader takes that and transpiles it to like some ancient IE6
Sure.
heinous thing. That seems like it would be pretty linear.
As long as for any given URL, there is no reentrancy and no multi-mapping, it works okay. The moment you do things like having pre-compilation where you could load the pre-compiled or optimized form from byte cache or something like that, now you can load two different forms, the raw form or the pre-compiled form. If you do something like file path searching, that means for any given URL, you can have a result from multiple. So you actually have to go and test multiple routes in your loader. Basically, you're going to see this whenever you have something where you need to call and
Figure
check if
stuff
something
out.
exists. Yeah, if it's
Okay.
just like a source-to-source transform, it's not an issue.
Okay. Because I'm thinking that's going to be most of the things, no?
I think the most popular one is going to be file path searching.
Even if we expose, that's what I was talking about in Slack earlier, that I was thinking that if we expose these utilities, that would potentially have a significant impact on what the loaders themselves need to do, because they kind of do that work. So if you're trying to, like, I don't know, find a package JSON or find a tsconfig or resolve this
Yep.
extensionless specifier, those things could handle that. And then that's,
Those
I think,
would still need
relieves
to
a whole
be
bunch of
reentrant.
conclusion.
Even those, if we expose the helpers, have to be reentrant, because adding a CoffeeScript loader or adding a TypeScript loader means that that has to be passed to the initial caller of those helper functions. So if I have an HTTPS loader, a CoffeeScript loader, and then a Babel loader, just like you said, if the HTTPS loader runs and it uses these utilities, and it doesn't do anything, it actually resolves against disk because it sees it's not relevant. It needs to call the resolve with the CoffeeScript result. And so it needs somehow for the CoffeeScript loader to tell it it should do that.
It needs a result from the CoffeeScript loader to tell it to do that?
Well, whoever does
Why?
the initial resolve.
Well, like, wait, sorry, you're talking about the resolve part of the chain or the load part of the chain? Because I
In
think
this
once
case,
you
it is
the resolve
clearer
chain
when we
settles,
talk
you
about
can't get back
resolve.
in. Okay, but once the
Here
resolve
we-
chain settles, you can't get back in.
Only in your current iterative design. In the recursive design, you can throw away results all the time. And
Well, yeah, you can throw them away, but you can't get back. Like, phase one is resolve, and then phase two is load. When resolve is done, like load can't jump back into resolve.
Ryan, can you promote Deb?
And, oh, I didn't see anything.
Yes, one moment.
So this is all in resolve. We never exit resolve ever in this whole conversation.
Oh, okay.
HTTPS is resolve. It sees it doesn't do anything. And so it needs to pass something to CoffeeScript. And CoffeeScript could also have TypeScript after it.
Yeah.
So like at what point and how do you call the utility function that it has all the loaders, various extensions properly managed?
I would think each loader would be responsible for that. So it's it
can't
would
do
receive
that.
the input. No?
Unfortunately, it can't do that because path searching has conflicts and you need to know the total sum of all extensions in order to know if you can. So a good example, let's say we have CoffeeScript and TypeScript and we just call it with the CoffeeScript extension searching on the first one, and we only call it with the TypeScript extension searching on the second one. So there is a very clear layout. If there is an foo.ts, if you include both at the same time, and if there is a foo/index.coffee, if you include both at the same time, foo.ts wins. If you
Right, because
don't,
it's higher, right?
yes. But we don't do that because the CoffeeScript loader was first. So we actually get foo/index.coffee. And if we swap this, if we swap the order of them, and we swap the file extension, so we have in foo.coffee and foo/index.ts, you once again get the wrong one.
I wouldn't say wrong. I would say you've gotten what you asked for.
No, because you wanted to resolve with the .coffee and .ts extensions working as a user. But these loaders can't do it with this helper function.
But then who does what? So let's say I found both of these things. How does it know what to do? Like if you've got the CoffeeScript loader and you've got the TypeScript loader and it says, hey, this could be either of these things. Like someone has to choose. And I would expect the CoffeeScript loader to choose itself and the TypeScript loader to choose itself.
Yes. The problem is you have two different people choosing. You need to reduce it to one person choosing. And I'm arguing that the first person to call whatever this helper is would be the one to choose. And it needs to have an aggregate of all the information it needs to perform a resolve.
Okay. I would expect it to be the user controlling the sequence, and that controls what happens. So like if the CoffeeScript loader is responsible for saying, sure, yeah, this resolves to CoffeeScript and it is first, then the user has chosen CoffeeScript to win in that competition. No?
I mean, as a author of an application, I wouldn't expect when I enable CoffeeScript and TypeScript for it to behave differently than normal path searching. Like you.
Well, then make a CoffeeScript TypeScript loader, no? How would it matter? How would it work in the recursive
It doesn't work.
scenario?
It doesn't work in either. The problem is the helper function idea. Like the helper function needs the total of aggregate information in order to work. And so doing it as early as possible is actually really bad because it needs to build up the aggregate information it needs as it goes through all the loaders.
Well, actually, sorry, I need to retract one of my earlier things. I would expect this helper to I would expect this helper to do that. Like, it would not necessarily be looking for a particular file extension or something. It would be looking for everything else that sort of matches what it knows. So let's say you've got foo, and then it says, I found foo.ts and also foo/index.coffee. I would expect this utility coming from Node to be blissfully ignorant of what the heck coffee it means and what the heck TS means.
So we don't do that in Node's core right now. That is asking for a full directory traversal. You can't be like, match this pattern. You'd be saying, for any given resolve, please read the entire directory.
Well, I'm not saying you would find all the things forever and ever.
You have to. You have to read the full directory, because in operating systems, they are generally unordered. You're not guaranteed an order. So the very first entry of the inode list could be one that partially matches, and you want to return that. And the last one could be.
I'm not saying like it's a fuzzy search on both ends. I'm saying like currently how the algorithm works is it is closest, right? So it looks for me and then out.
Yes, but it does so in a very specific order. It never searches the directory. It only searches specific file paths.
Okay.
So if you are going to resolve with the node module resolution thing, the flag, it doesn't ever look for index.coffee right now. You never ping that file. If you add an extension, CommonJS will ping that file, but it won't search a directory.
Okay.
If you have a built-in that just returns everything that fuzzy matches, you have to ping the whole directory, not just individual files.
Okay.
Because you don't know what you're looking for, basically. You don't know the extensions you're searching for. So you just have to grab all of them, and then the person will filter them out.
Yes. That's bad?
That's very bad. That's
well, I guess if you have like 1 million files, that could be bad.
It's not just 1 million files. It's also just you've kind of taken something that was very selective and added a new phase to it, timing-wise. And the timing-wise means there's slower perf and potential for race conditions, which file operations are already race conditions, so that's fine. Perf-wise, this is going to be people have to sort things instead of it being, first found wins. Now you're having to manually sort results.
But you just said they need to be aware of not just the first found.
If you do a directory traversal, like you're talking about, Node's current implementations don't. They stop on the first one found.
Okay.
So
but I'm confused because like I was expecting.
If a helper returns all possible matches, that means it must do a directory traversal to find all possible matches. And it must sort them to the best possible matches.
Okay. Well, let's say I give it foo, and we're currently in some directory. Sure. So it would find, it would say, oh, there is in this same directory, there is a foo.ts and there is a foo directory that contains index.coffee. So it would, those would be the only two things in the current directory that it would match, and then it would kind of stop. It wouldn't say, oh, there's also a bar, and then let me
No,
check
but it
inside
has to
bar and
read the
find.
bar. It still has to do the file operation and see that there is bar.ts
Yeah.
and throw it away.
Okay.
And then it has to sort, which for sorts under 10, that's not too bad.
Mhm.
I hope there aren't 10 conflicts ever.
I don't
But-
understand how it's different then, because if you're saying that it needs to it needs to return the possible matches, then this
So
seems like the nature of the
currently,
beast.
No, the nature of the beast today is it never does a directory search. It just tries to open files in order because it knows all the possible files it will ever look for.
Oh, because it has an explicit set of extensions and potential matches. Like it's
Correct.
going to be .js or of the current thing or /index.js, for
Yes.
instance. Sorry.
Yeah,
Yes, I now get it.
we don't implement it that way.
Okay.
Where
Wait, you don't?
we don't implement the directory read list way.
Okay. So it's try this thing, failed. Try that thing, failed. Okay.
And there are conditions where if you try a thing, it can intentionally cause an error and blow up your process.
Okay, fair.
Yep.
Should we have
Those are
like some
generally
kind of
about permissions.
and how would the recursive way be any better?
So we haven't designed for this case in either direction, but the recursive way,
Oh,
as it goes through, instead of calling the default loader as the first thing, it would go through the HTTPS loader. The HTTPS loader wouldn't add any information. It's nothing relevant to it. Then it would go to the coffee loader. The coffee loader, when it passes off to the next one, would be like, hey, do this resolve. Also, please add the .coffee extension if you do any searching. TS would then add .ts to that list. And then when it gets to Node, it would see, oh, I have my list. It has .coffee and .ts added onto it. Okay.
wait, sorry. What is this magic list?
It's just a parameter that you pass. I mean, you pass right now the context. It could be in context. That's fine.
You're proposing adding.
I'm not proposing anything. You're just asking how it could work.
In this scenario, the supposition or what have you, this theoretical thing is it does not exist in the current proposal. So you're saying like we chuck this into context or something.
You could. I'm not recommending we do, but
Sure.
The composition model is data can be added by each loader before the initial or default behavior.
What if we had some kind of like registration phase? So registration, the loader says like, I need this, like, this is me.
We're just complicating things at this point. We're adding hooks everywhere. And so you get to be less and less explicit. You also get to a point where registration denial becomes hard. So here you could have a like no TypeScript loader at the end that ensures that that list, when it's passed to the default, never includes .ts or .node. In particular, .node is the more important one. You don't want to load C++. So no matter what the other loaders do, it'll just refuse to do a resolve and look for .node files.
That sounds really naughty. Why would we allow that?
Because you don't want to have system calls available to the user code. Like it's a security thing. You don't want people to use C++.
Okay.
If they have some alternative, they have a WASM fallback, sure, I don't care. Just not C++, which can call the operating system directly.
Okay. Okay, cool. Another problem to think about.
So we don't need to be so specific to iterative versus recursive. The whole thing is just about, hey, you need to aggregate the data as you go along for all these designs. And trying to make it so you never need to aggregate the data is always going to be like, we're going to add another hook to loaders, basically. And so you're going to say, we're going to aggregate our data elsewhere in a different hook. Yeah.
Okay.
So with iterative design, you can aggregate the data while you iterate and then be like, please restart the loop.
Mhm.
It's fine, works. With recursive design, you just do it via parameter passing. Yeah, that works too. They both have ups and downs. It's fine.
Okay. Cool. I will capture those bits and noodle on them.
Hey, sorry I missed a big chunk of this. I'll try to do a PR that adds the stuff we were talking about short circuit to the recursive design doc. And I guess, Jacob, if you want to ping us when the other doc is kind of ready for review, then we could start kind of maybe doing discussion async of like, you know, PR reviews and stuff like that. Maybe we could talk about it at the next meeting.
Okay, sounds good.
Cool. The one last thing we should probably talk about, that whole import assertions thing. I don't know if I'll be able to find the time, but I was thinking of trying to find the time to adapt that PR that Antoine opened to just do what we discussed in the TSC meeting, which is just make assert required for import of JSON, and that's it. There's not any version of assertions being optional anywhere in the code base, whether flagged or not. They would just always be required for JSON, never required for anything else. And that would be it for now. And then if he wants to add support for making them optional for JSON, that could be like a separate PR that he opens, I suppose. Does anyone see any issues with that?
No. The only issue I foresee is like a human one of like someone being unhappy about something, because it
I'm
seems
sure
like they're
someone's
quite
going to complain
contentious.
that they insist on it, but I mean, he asked the TSC to get involved and they made a decision. So it's sort of like, you know, he went straight to the Supreme Court right off the bat, and they didn't rule the way he wanted, and so he's kind of stuck with it. He can't really, I mean, he can go back to them a second time, they're going to say the same thing. So if anyone, you know, blocks the PR that I make, at least on those grounds of like, no, we want this other behavior, I mean, they could block it for technical reasons or something. But just saying, no, we want it to be optional, I think the TSC is just gonna swat him down. Because the TSC like Miles in particular, wants this landed and shipped. So I think this is the clearest way forward for that. And they can open the PR for the other, and I think it's gonna just sit there indefinitely, because I mean, I'm opposed to it. I think Miles is opposed to it. You know, maybe you and Bradley, I don't know, but like there certainly isn't consensus to land on it. And it would take a vote of the TSC to override the lack of consensus. And I think the TSC is not in any hurry to do so. I think for like, even if they eventually do that at some point, they wouldn't do it immediately. They would want the assertion required format to ship and be out in the wild for a while before they consider overruling us and shipping both. So.
Okay, cool. And you're good to do the implementation of that?
I mean, it's more a question of, do I have the time? I mean, if you want to tackle it, by all means. I'm not sure when or if I'll have the time for it. So that's the big question. But if you're excited to do it, by all means, go for it. Just let me know so we don't both work on it. But
sure.
But yeah. So
okay, cool. Yeah, basically, I guess it's a matter of priority of because of
Yeah, I
course,
was figuring
have
you
limited
should
time.
probably be working on the chaining thing. Like if you only have limited
Yeah.
time, the chaining is probably more important. But if you get blocked on that, like if you know, are waiting on design questions or something and you want to do other work, then this is another option. But yeah, whatever you think.
Okay,
So,
cool. Yeah, and I guess there's also the option of like tag teaming it. I don't know how big this pull request is going to be.
I think it's small. Like his pull request that adds it as optional with the flag
Mhm.
isn't all that large. Like it's something like 25 files, but like half of them are tests. A big chunk of it is documentation. There's not that much actual code in there. The biggest chunk that like actually needs to be rewritten is there's a bunch of logic that he adds to ESM loader. That's like, instead of like checking if job is undefined, he checks if job is like falsy and then does a bunch of things.
Yeah,
That's,
he's guarding against a race condition there that I demanded.
yeah, and it doesn't look like good code. Like I don't like, he adds a bunch of weak maps for tracking these type assertions and stuff. And I feel like none of this is necessary. Like we should just pass through the assertions as another bit of metadata about the import statement, just like the specifier, and check it and move on. It doesn't need to become part of the cache or anything, I don't think.
To be clear, if we have one-to-many cache keys on assertions, we do have to have those weak maps.
Right, but my whole point is that I don't want it to be one-to-many. I'm going to try to take that part out.
I mean, that's fine for this PR, but if we ever do add it, we'll add them back.
Right, but that's his PR. That would be like, you know, him rebasing on top of my PR would be adding the weak maps to add it to the key, blah, 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 like you're saying. Like I was trying to not add that complexity to the loader, like until we needed it. Like if and when we ever have optional assertions, yeah, then we add it. But if that's not a feature we're gonna add to Node, you know, for other reasons, like because we don't want to for UX reasons, say, then why put all this extra logic and extra complexity in ESM loader? You know what I mean? Would you agree with that, Bradley? Or do you think there's other parts that we should put in there?
I don't care. I don't have strong feelings.
All right. Well, I mean, if you have even weak feelings, please let me know, because that would, you know, I want to do what you think is best. So like,
I think either works in the end. It's just whatever complexity we want to take on.
Question about, well, actually, we're getting a little bit over time. Maybe we can move this to another one. Sticking it into context, that sounds like a good idea, but how would we, like if a loader is getting involved here, the loader must respect the assertion, doesn't it? Must it?
no, because the loader could do whatever the hell it wants. I mean, it could fucking change.
Not on this one.
I was just
Not
going to say, I don't think
JSON.
that's allowed.
What do you mean?
JSON has an explicit callout in the spec demanded by browsers. If you make an import request with type JSON, it must, 100% must return a JSON result.
Well, yeah, but if a user loader breaks that spec,
Nope. This is like going to be built into the VMs. They're working on it. It must return a JSON module record, not a source text module record. Source text module records can be whatever.
no, but I mean, like it's almost like you're rewriting the import statement before it gets to V8. You know, it's just like as if you changed it from like import data from /API to import data from data.json, or maybe the reverse of that. Import from data.json
Unfortunately,
to
the VMs are going to enforce this. It is not going to work that way. You can rewrite specifiers. Nobody cares about that. The web really strongly felt that type JSON must return a module that runs through the JSON module system.
right. But if
think
we're
that
allowing a
makes
loader
sense.
to be able to rewrite a specifier, we have to let the loader has to be able to rewrite the assertion too if it wants to.
No. It can rewrite the assertion to some extent, but not the type JSON one. The type JSON one is going to be checked at the call site.
Right, but I'm assuming it gets checked after user loaders, not before.
It gets checked after, yes, because the result of the loaders must return a JSON.
Right, so that's what I'm saying. Like if the loader returns format JSON, then it needs to have the import assertion for JSON, or else it'll fail. But
Okay, yes.
but like if there's an import statement that's like import data from data.json, assert type JSON, say that's your import statement, and a user loader changes that to like import foo.js and then returns like type module source and then JavaScript, that should work. Like that's the same thing as like rewriting the specifier to something completely different, you know?
Yes.
Now, maybe we need to add the assertions as part of the return value from the load hook. Or it's just implicit, like if they return format JSON, you assume it's assert JSON. But I don't know.
It really depends on how you want to design around that. That's my main blocking point on supporting both.
Well,
Okay.
whatever you advise is fine
JavaScript.
with me. Whatever you advise is fine with me, Bradley. I'm kind of more of the opinion that like, the whole point of loader hooks is to let people override things. So like let them override whatever they want. And it needs to be clean by the time Node gets it and starts to like create the module record and so on and register it with V8. But whatever happens before that point, like is kind of like whatever, because someone's going to want to write a loader that makes assertionless import statements of JSON work. So like, and that's reasonable because there's lots and lots of code out there that's like, require package.json or import package.json. And so we want people to be able to write a loader that make that into runnable code.
Nope, I do not right now. I don't, unless somebody wants to work on the cache key problem.
Sorry, what was the cache key problem? Where the assertion needs to be incorporated into the cache key?
The assertion is always incorporated into the cache key per the spec now. Thank you. I don't like that. I fought against that. But the assertion being in the cache key means that when you do an import with and without the assertion, you get two different results. And we have to manually redirect the job to be the proper one. Unfortunately, even beyond this, because of HTTP timing and remote code loading. So due to this, that means basically if you have these two different forms at the same time, you have to introduce some sort of system to determine who wins. And if the win is coalesced, as in JSON and with the type and without the type point to the same module, or if they point to two different modules, the default, according to the spec, is two different modules. So you have to have a way to coalesce. That's one. So you have a join operation of some kind that we have to introduce. And you also have to have a way to reject one or the other, which we already have a way to reject one or the other. You can just throw. It's great. So if we only support one form, we already support this. If we don't, we have to introduce a coalesce operation. And coalesce operations are complicated, and I don't want to think about them. If somebody else wants to come with their user loader demands and give me a coalesce operation.
I'm going to do the most simple version as part of my PR just to get it shipped, for public cases. And then it's like, we'll have to figure out what to do with loaders if it's passed into the resolve hook, and is it overridable? Is it something that should be returned by one of the hooks? Like those are all questions we need to resolve, but maybe they don't need to be resolved all in one PR with that just enables it for, the non-loader use case, like the regular JavaScript code use case. Does that make sense?
If it doesn't, do we run the risk of like borking loaders? So like making it so that they can't function as they need to pass
I think the worst case would be that
VM.
like if it says assert type JSON, the loader has to return that. You can't, the loader would just not be able to rewrite that to something else. That would be the worst
Right, but
case.
right, but the loader needs to be aware that that exists and like the assertion was set so that it needs to respect it.
Well,
So like,
that
we
I think
can't
we
just be
should-
like
Well,
FOMO or YOLO.
I don't think there's any reason why we wouldn't know that and be able to pass that into the loaders, just as we currently pass in the conditions, like that
Oh, no, no, no.
context.conditions object.
I'm just saying, like, in terms of limiting the scope of load, I think just calling out that we need to at least expose to the loaders the information that it needs to not run afoul of something, rather than like kind of just chucking it into the darkness and saying like, good luck.
Yeah, we would tell them what the assertion was. There's no reason not to do that.
Okay.
But I think to Bradley's point, allowing them to modify it or disregard it might be
Mhm.
things that we can't permit.
I think it would be
If
reasonable for that
that's-
to be step 2.
If that's the case, then that's the case. I mean, I feel like that's can't be the end of the story, because like if we have something like transpiling CoffeeScript, then like surely we should be able to, change the assertion or something like that.
Those are very
But
different operations.
Well, because
Yeah.
like CoffeeScript is itself executable and
Well,
JSON is not.
CoffeeScript doesn't modify how caches work. Import assertions modify caching.
Fair, yeah.
well, I mean, that could be the solution, is like if users really want to be able to say, right, without the import assertions, then some kind of transpilation loader needs to add it, because like they would never have an initial entry point of a JSON file. So whatever the initial entry point is, index.js or index.coffee or whatever, that initial file, say it's index.coffee, right? And say there are no assertions in there. When index.coffee is transpiled into JavaScript, that transpilation would need to add the assertions, and then it's that transpilation result then that gets parsed to look for more import statements to follow, and then those import statements would have the assertion as Node wants them to, and so on and so forth. So that could be how users do it, is like they just transpile to make it a proper JSON import before Node reads it, essentially.
Yeah.
Almost like a build step.
Yeah.
So that should always be possible, I think, Bradley, because then there always would be an import statement with the assertion.
Yeah, that's fine.
So,
Yeah. And I think it would be tons of trouble to make it not possible and to no effect.
well, we would never be able to enforce it not being possible,
Yeah.
because we can't like just parse CoffeeScript and things like that inside Node. So
Right.
anyway, I need to get going. Is there anything else we should add to this meeting?
No, I think not. I'll send a quick write-up in Slack and tag you, Bradley, for that re-entrant thing that kind of broke my brain, just to make sure I copy it down properly.
Okay.
Cool.
All right.
Yeah, hopefully I'll have the JSON assert PR, or if you want to do it before the next meeting, which I think is in 2 weeks. And then maybe that can put that
Ambitious.
whole question to bed and we don't have to talk about it in a meeting, I hope.
Okay.
And then hopefully maybe the next meeting can be like, now we'll have more finished design docs for the 2 proposals, and we can like run them by people and get feedback. Although I would love to just get them merged in, and if you have the time to start implementing one of them before 2 weeks, maybe we can just do this all offline, and then the meeting can just be about like discussing progress and any issues you found, and can help you troubleshoot and stuff like that.
Okay, cool. Yeah, definitely. If you want to have the JSON stuff implemented by next meeting, I would not have time to do that. But getting the docs and stuff updated, yes, and possibly starting on an implementation of one of them, yes.
Okay. All right, well then let's aim for that. Bradley, how's your availability looking? Like if I have a branch for that PR, would you have time to review it before I open it as a PR, or should I just open
Yeah,
it
that's
and
small enough.
see what happens? Okay.
Cool.
All right, I'll let you know.
Cool. Cheers.
All right. Thanks, guys. See ya.
Bye. Dewey.